Morning, everybody. In the series of the character of Moshiach, we've learned that. We've learned that the main novelty of the coming Mashiach is that Mashiach will come, we'll see godliness. That's the main change between today and the coming of Mashiach, is that there will be a revelation of godliness in the world. And this is how we explained the prophecy of Yaakov. When Yaakov was speaking to his children, he said to Yehuda that the monarchy will not leave the tribe of Yehuda ad ki yaveh Shiloi, until Shiloi will come. So we learned that the word Shiloi is America equivalent to Moshe, and Yavo Shiloi, Shiloi will come, is America equivalent to Mashiach. So Yavo plus Moshe equals Mashiach. What that means is that Moshe Rabbeinu, in general, he accomplishes what we will witness. Mashiach will come. In general, he gives the power for it. Moshe is called the first Redeemer and the final Redeemer. But the one who's actually going to bring about the goal of creation, there's a one facet, one aspect that Moshe will not complete, and only Mashiach will complete. And this is something that the grandson of Yehuda, David, the ancestor of Mashiach, only from the offspring of David will we see this this novelty of the coming Mashiach. For you to understand what exactly is it that Moshe Rabbeinu gave, and what is it that Mashiach will add. So what we learned before was that although Moshe Rabbeinu revealed godliness in the world, the Jewish people saw godliness at the splitting of the Red Sea. They saw revelation of godliness when the Torah was given. But the day after the Torah was given, the people woke up the next morning. Their bodies didn't change. They saw the physical reality. Yes, when Hashem gave us the Torah, there was a vivid revelation of godliness, and not just they understood, not just they had a conviction, but in language of in the Hasidic lexicon, elikus b'pshitus, v'ilmus b'schachus. At the moment that God gave us the Torah, the obvious thing to us was godliness. Godliness became what is obvious and tangible, and the world became something that was more abstract, more in the distance, more in the periphery, not something which was front and center. So Moshe Rabbeinu brought the revelation of godliness to the world, but it wasn't the way that it will last, because the revelation that came through Moshe Rabbeinu was coming from on high, coming from Hashem. And the goal of creation is that not only should we have elikus b'pshitus, should godliness be obvious to us because of Hashem is doing something, because Hashem is making it happen. That's not really obvious. That's not really natural. If the only reason we're able to experience godliness is because of God's revelation, then it's not called pshita, it's not called obvious, it's not called natural, it's not called our own thing. It's because of Hashem. The goal of creation is that not only should our minds and our hearts have a conviction of the truth of Hashem, but not only should we see godliness, but our sight of godliness should be in a similar way we see physical things. Why do we see physical things? Not because of a revelation, not because of some kind of heroic intervention that God is doing into our bodies that we see physical things. That's the nature of our eye. The nature of our eye is to see physical things. The goal of creation is that in the very same way that we see the physical, we should see godliness. That's the goal of creation. So Moshe Rabbeinu brought the first revelation of godliness to the physical world in a way that affected the whole world. But what's unique about Mashiach, David, and Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, who is the one who will announce the coming of Mashiach, what's unique about these tzaddikim is that they will bring godliness not only into the world, but it will come from the world, from the perspective of the world. That the world itself naturally will be a place for Hashem. Will be a place where godliness is revealed naturally. So let's understand, why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu does the first part, and Eliyahu Hanavi, who will announce to us when Mashiach will come, and David and Mashiach, the progeny of Yehuda, what exactly is the difference between these two models, and why is it that, what is Moshe Rabbeinu's role, and what is the role of Eliyahu Hanavi and the role of David HaMelech? There's a verse about the coming of Mashiach. It says, "V'nigla kved Hashem," the glory of Hashem will be revealed. "V'ro kol basar yachdav," and all flesh will see godliness. So this verse has two parts. There's one part which talks about God's revelation, but then there's a second phrase that begins with the letter Vav and something else. Not just God will reveal himself, but kol basar, all physical flesh will see godliness from the perspective of the flesh itself, from the perspective of the body itself. Our body will naturally see godliness. So let's understand a little bit first about the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu, and then we'll be able to understand why he accomplishes the first stage, revelation of godliness. And then we'll see the unique achievement of Eliyahu Hanavi and David HaMelech, and why they accomplish the second aspect about the world inviting godliness, and godliness being natural to creation. So Maimonides says that the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu, between Moses, and all of the prophets, is that all of the prophets, when they gave prophecy, they fell on their faces, they had to take off their clothing, they were frightened, they were overwhelmed. That's one difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and all of the prophets. On the other hand, the Rambam says, Moshe Rabbeinu kadaber ish al re'ehu, Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Hashem like a friend. He wasn't in a trance and overwhelmed. He spoke to Hashem like a friend. That's what the Torah says about Moshe Rabbeinu. Another thing the Talmud says, difference in Moshe Rabbeinu and all the prophets, is that all the prophets, it says that when they gave prophecy, they said, "So is the word of Hashem." It's something like this, Ko Amar Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu, on the other hand, it says when he gave prophecy, he said, "Zed Dvar Hashem." This is the word of Hashem, exactly this. A third thing that we find, a difference in Moshe Rabbeinu and all their prophets, is that all their prophets, it says in the Talmud, they gave prophecy. What did they see? They saw their prophecy through an allegory, through a parable, through a riddle, through. It wasn't a vivid revelation. It was what's the language of the Talmud is it wasn't through a vivid, transparent glass. Moshe Rabbeinu, however, his revelation of godliness was vivid and transparent, and he saw that things the way they really are. So Chassidus explains what's the underlying difference between Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy and all other prophets. What Chassidus says is this, that when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, it says, Nismala habayis kula eira. The house he was born in was full of light. Vatera eisik yitovu. It says they saw that he was good. What was so good about him? The house he was born in was full of light. The meaning of his house being full of light is not just the house around him, but Chassidus says the house also refers to his body. His body is the house of the soul. Moshe Rabbeinu, his body was transparent to his soul. His body did not hide the light of Hashem in his soul. And therefore, right when he was born, they could see his shine. They could see the godliness in him. And as Moshe Rabbeinu developed in life, he caused his body to have less and less of a concealment of his soul, to the point that he experienced prophecy, to the point that his prophecy was vivid, to the point that he didn't need to go into a trance, that he didn't need to fall on his face, that he wasn't overwhelmed, he wasn't having listened to music or to go away from the world, but he, as he is a human being in the world, his body did not conceal godliness at all, and therefore he had a vivid revelation of godliness in the physical world, in his body. And yet we find something unique about Eliyahu Navi, about Elijah the prophet, that we don't find about Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, his body needed to be buried. His body was buried in Mount Nebo. On the other hand, Elijah the prophet, the Torah says that he wasn't buried. He went up to heaven on a chariot. We find Moshe Rabbeinu, his body goes up, his body needs to be buried. And Elijah the prophet, the opposite, that Elijah the prophet, his body goes up to heaven. Reb Zev, if you're on mute, I'm wondering if you're actually recording the class. How could you record if you're on mute? Okay, whatever. We'll figure it out later.
I'm not recording. Dr. Bressman said he was recording.
I have it, Jeff.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. All right. So I thought I recognized your voice before, saying you're recording. I misunderstood. All right. So let's understand this. Why is it, if Moshe Rabbeinu is perfectly transparent to godliness, why is it that his body needed to be buried? And Elijah the prophet, who certainly when he experienced prophecy, he didn't have that relationship with Hashem in a way that like a person speaking to his friend, but he did have to fall on his face. He did have to hear music. He did have to go into a trance. It was the way that overwhelmed him. His body wasn't such a vessel for prophecy as Moshe Rabbeinu's body was. So why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu's body is buried and Elijah the prophet's body is not buried? The Chassidus explains it's a bigger subject, but in short, Chassidus explains the difference is this. There is the light of Hashem in the soul, and there's also the spark of Hashem in the body. There are two ways of serving Hashem. There's serving Hashem with your soul and serving Hashem with your body. The role of Moshe Rabbeinu, he was a servant of Hashem with his soul. He was about revealing his soul in the world. His body was his focus on elevating his body was not revealing the spark of Hashem in the body, but merely causing his body to not conceal godliness. So therefore, as long as his soul is in his body, the neshama is shining, and the body is transparent to it. But once the soul leaves the body, then the body needs to be buried. On the other hand, Elijah the prophet, his role was to reveal the light of Hashem in the body itself. To reveal spirituality, but what kind of spirituality? Not the higher kind of spirituality that comes from the soul, but the lower kind of spirituality that's in the body itself. And since the kind of godly revelation that Elijah the prophet was close to, was the body kind of godly light, was from the body itself. Therefore, his body was able to ascend to heaven. He revealed the godliness in his body. On the other hand, when he had a prophetic vision, a soul vision, a godly vision that's beyond the body, it was overwhelming for him, like all other prophets. And therefore, he fell on his face, and he had to hear music, and all other things that the Maimonides says about all the prophets also applied to Elijah. But when he passed away, his body was able to ascend to heaven. Moshe Rabbeinu, his body needed to be buried. But on the other hand, when he received prophecy, it was vivid, it was clear. He didn't have to. He spoke to Hashem like a friend. He wasn't overwhelmed by the revelation. So this distinction is also, we see, as I think I mentioned last time, that between Moshe and Elijah, we see this also in the way they were born. Moshe Rabbeinu's gestation period, how long was his mother pregnant with Moshe Rabbeinu? For 7 months. How long was Eliyahu Navi's mother pregnant with him? For 12 months. The difference between them is that the focus of Elijah was to elevate the body itself. Therefore, there was more of a focus on the body's development. And on the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu, the body was just a window to the soul, and therefore the contrary. The focus was that the soul should come to the world without any major adaptation to the body. So, in short, when Mashiach will come, a similar phenomena is brought to the world through Moshe and Mashiach. Moshe Rabbeinu, his role is he brings to the world what he has in himself. He brings to the world the greatest revelation of godliness. They see the revelation of Hashem, a simple maidservant at the splitting of the Red Sea, saw a godly revelation what the prophets didn't see. Pure revelation, amazing. But she remained a simple maidservant. She didn't change. Moshe Rabbeinu was about revealing Hashem to the world, revealing something higher to the world. Moshe Rabbeinu brought us the 10 plagues, the revelation of splitting the Red Sea, the giving of the Torah, about something coming from heaven. On the other hand, Elijah the prophet and David HaMelech, their role is about revealing the godliness which in creation. So that Hashem's revelation should be seen from our eye the same way our eye sees physical things. And that's why we find this distinction in their own lives, where Eliyahu Hanavi, his body goes up to heaven, and Moshe Rabbeinu, his body needs to be buried. Because Elijah is about the world itself being elevated, the world going up to heaven, so to speak, the world being a vessel, the world being transparent to its own godly core, versus Moshe Rabbeinu, his function is to reveal higher things in the world, to reveal the godly revelation that is beyond creation, to reveal the splitting of the Red Sea, to reveal the giving of the Torah. And so Moshe Rabbeinu brought the high revelation from on high, and the role of Mashiach is that this high godly revelation will be invited into the world from the perspective of the world. God, in Mr. Hashem, tomorrow, as we continue the Rebbe's talk about the 22nd of Shvat, we'll see this relates to that as well. Any questions or comments? Have a great day, Chaim Peretz. A great day, Reb Zev. A great day, Reb David.